You can feel it right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not sitting quietly this offseason. They're not just evaluating the roster, they're exploring pressure points. And one name that keeps circling back into the conversation, whether people want to admit it or not, is A.J. Brown. Let's get straight to it. There is tension brewing between A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles. Whether it's frustration with usage, chemistry, or internal dynamics, the smoke has been visible for a while. When you start seeing veteran voices like Jason Kelce getting involved publicly, that tells you something is bubbling beneath the surface. And when a player of Brown's caliber becomes even remotely available, teams with real needs at wide receiver have to at least consider it. And that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers come in. The Steelers absolutely need another legitimate wide receiver. Yes, they committed significant money to DK Metcalf. Yes, they're hoping internal development and the draft can help long term. But if you're operating under a win-now mandate, and everything about this organization suggests they still are, then adding a veteran who consistently produces 1,000-yard seasons is not a wild idea. It's strategic. Financially, it's not outrageous either. Brown carries a $23 million cap hit in 2026. In today's NFL, with the cap climbing aggressively, that number is digestible, especially for a team that does not currently have a franchise quarterback contract clogging the books. There's also flexibility built into the structure of his deal with an out after the 2027 season that matters. You're not marrying the contract for half a decade with no escape. But here's the part Steelers fans need to wrestle with: risk. The Steelers already invested heavily at wide receiver. They already absorbed a large financial commitment, and when you stack another major personality in that room, especially one who has not exactly been quiet about his frustrations, you're introducing volatility. Historically, Pittsburgh claims to avoid drama. In reality, they've often embraced talent and dealt with the noise later. So the real question becomes, is the upside worth it? Because talent-wise, A.J. Brown still wins. Even in a year filled with turbulence, he produced, and sometimes a change of scenery resets everything. The Steelers have an opportunity window here. They could potentially get a veteran quarterback for a season. They could draft a rookie and ease him in, pairing that quarterback, whether it's a bridge option or a first-round selection, with two experienced wide receivers gives you insulation. It gives you margin for error. Now, what would it cost? The idea floated is a third-round pick in the 2026 NFL draft pick, no, 76, for a player of Brown's caliber that's aggressive in Pittsburgh's favor. It suggests the Eagles are motivated to move on. If that valuation is accurate, you at least have to pick up the phone. But here's the layer beneath that. If you trade for A.J. Brown, you cannot stop building. You still draft a wide receiver early, you still invest in youth, because the Steelers' biggest issue the last few seasons hasn't just been star power, it's been depth, it's been sustainability. And if you're thinking long-term, you can't allow yourself to be in a position 2 years from now where both veteran contracts expire and you're scrambling again. There's also the chemistry question. Brown would walk into a room where Metcalf is already positioned as a primary target. Would Brown accept being 1B? Would that dynamic function? That's something Mike Tomlin and Omar would have to evaluate deeply before making any move. But don't dismiss the smoke. For 2 years now, the Steelers and A.J. Brown rumors have quietly resurfaced. Where there's consistent chatter, there's often at least exploratory contact. And this offseason feels different. Pittsburgh is at a crossroads. They are not rebuilding, at least not publicly. They're trying to reload while staying competitive. That creates bold decision opportunities. And bold decisions carry risk. So here's the real conversation. If you're the Steelers, operating in this exact window, knowing the quarterback situation is fluid, knowing the cap is flexible, knowing the wide receiver room still needs reinforcement, do you send that third-round pick and bring A.J. Brown to Pittsburgh? Or do you stay patient and trust the draft to solve it? I want to hear from you. If that trade is realistically on the table, are you pulling the trigger or are you walking away? Because once you pull that trigger, there's no halfway. You're committing to a direction, and that direction says very clearly, we are not rebuilding. We are not waiting. We are pushing chips into the middle of the table. And that's why this conversation can't just live in a vacuum around A.J. Brown. It connects directly to what the Steelers believe about their quarterback timeline. If you bring in a veteran quarterback for one season, pairing him with two established wide receivers gives you the best possible evaluation environment. There are no excuses. The protection has to hold up, the ball has to come out, the production has to be there, and if you draft a rookie quarterback and let him sit for a year, you're building a runway for him in year 2 with experienced weapons already in place. That matters more than people think. Look at teams around the league that throw rookie quarterbacks into unstable situations. No protection, no reliable targets, no veteran presence. And then we're shocked when development stalls. Pittsburgh has an opportunity to avoid that trap entirely, but only if they're willing to be aggressive now. Now let's address the elephant in the room, personality, and locker room culture. The Steelers love to talk about culture, they love to emphasize stability, but they have also proven that when elite talent becomes available, they will at least evaluate the move. The key question is whether A.J. Brown's frustrations in Philadelphia are systemic or situational. Is it a clash with scheme, with quarterback chemistry, with expectations, or is it something deeper? If Pittsburgh believes it's situational, if they believe a reset solves it, then this becomes far more realistic. And from a roster construction standpoint, there's another factor: timeline control. With an out after 2027, you essentially give yourself a 2-year competitive window. 2 years to evaluate your quarterback situation, 2 years to determine whether this core can truly contend. After that, you pivot if necessary. That flexibility is valuable. But there's another side. If this doesn't work, if the chemistry falters, if production dips, if the quarterback situation remains unstable, then you've spent draft capital and cap space during a transitional phase, and transitional phases require clarity, not confusion. This is where Omar earns his reputation one way or another, because this type of move isn't about fantasy football production, it's about long-term structural vision. And I'll say this clearly: if the Steelers truly believe they are one dynamic playmaker away from competing deep into January, then standing still is more dangerous than acting. But if they believe this roster still has foundational holes, offensive line depth, secondary consistency, long-term quarterback clarity, then maybe patience is the smarter path. That's why this isn't just about A.J. Brown, it's about identity. Are the Steelers trying to squeeze one more competitive window out of the current defensive core? Are they trying to bridge toward a young quarterback with infrastructure already built? Or are they quietly preparing for a deeper reset than anyone wants to admit? Because trading for A.J. Brown answers that question loudly. And here's something else to consider: perception around the league. When a franchise acquires a player of that caliber, it signals belief, it signals urgency. It tells veterans in that locker room that management is serious about competing right now. And sometimes that belief alone changes the tone of a season. So let's bring this back to you. You've seen the production. You know the financials are manageable. You understand the risk. You know the timeline flexibility exists. And you know the Steelers need another legitimate wide receiver presence. If that third-round pick is truly the asking price, do you make the move and embrace the risk? Or do you hold your assets and trust the draft to deliver the next star? Now let's take this one step deeper, because if this move happens, it doesn't just affect the wide receiver room, it reshapes the entire draft board. If A.J. Brown is in Pittsburgh, the urgency to force a wide receiver at the top of the draft drops significantly. You're no longer drafting out of desperation, you're drafting out of structure. That's a massive difference. Instead of reaching for a receiver because you have to, you can attack the offensive line, the secondary, or even package picks to move around the board, and that flexibility is power. Right now, the Steelers are walking into the offseason with multiple holes and multiple unknowns. When you operate like that, you tend to chase needs instead of controlling the board. But if you secure a proven veteran wideout, suddenly the board opens up. Suddenly, you can take the best player available. Suddenly, you're dictating the pace instead of reacting to it. And don't overlook the quarterback domino effect. If the Steelers acquire A.J. Brown, it makes Pittsburgh far more attractive to a veteran quarterback. You're not selling potential, you're selling established production. You're selling to legitimate outside threats. You're selling a defense that can keep games manageable. That pitch becomes easier. At the same time, if they draft a rookie quarterback, that young player steps into a situation where defenses cannot stack the box and dare him to win alone. That matters for development, it matters for confidence, it matters for long-term trajectory. But here's where it gets real. If you make this move and it fails, there's no hiding from it. You gave up capital, you absorbed money, you signaled urgency, and if January doesn't look different, the criticism will be loud. Very loud. That's the gamble. The Steelers have lived in the middle for years, competitive enough to avoid collapse, but not explosive enough to break through. This kind of trade is an attempt to break that pattern. It's a swing, not reckless, but bold. And bold moves define eras. If you stay patient and rely strictly on the draft, you're betting on projection. If you trade for A.J. Brown, you're betting on proven output and a controlled 2-year window. There is no safe answer here, only philosophy. Do you build cautiously and protect assets? Or do you recognize a window and try to pry it open wider? That's what this entire discussion really comes down to. Because if Pittsburgh believes this defense still has championship-level football left in it, if they believe the offensive core is one weapon away, then sitting still might actually be the bigger risk. So now, I want your final verdict. Are you comfortable sending that third-round pick and bringing A.J. Brown into this offense? Or do you believe the smarter play is to protect the draft capital and build through youth? And here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. This move would also test the front office's confidence in what they already built, because if you trade for a player like A.J. Brown, you're essentially saying the offensive structure is ready, you're saying the scheme is stable, you're saying the quarterback plan, even if it's temporary, is clear enough to support a high-volume receiver. If that confidence isn't there internally, you don't make this move. There's also the psychological layer. When a franchise acquires a big-name receiver, it shifts expectations immediately. The margin for moral victories disappears. 9 wins won't feel acceptable anymore. A wildcard exit won't feel like progress. The standard becomes deeper playoff success and fast. That pressure doesn't just land on the quarterback, it lands on the coordinator, it lands on the offensive line, it lands on the head coach. Every incomplete pass to a high-profile receiver becomes a talking point. Every sideline camera shot becomes amplified. That's the reality of bringing in a star. But there's something else to consider: market dynamics. Wide receivers are expensive. The price only goes up. If Pittsburgh waits and tries to solve this through free agency next year, the numbers won't get smaller. If they wait for the draft and miss, they're right back in the same cycle. Sometimes the most expensive move is waiting too long, and this franchise historically does not operate impulsively. When they move, it's calculated. When they absorb money, they've mapped it out years ahead. That's why this rumor refuses to disappear. It's not random fan speculation. It fits within the type of structured aggression they've shown before. Now imagine the alternative. Imagine they pass, they draft a receiver, the rookie flashes but isn't ready. The quarterback struggles adjusting, the offense remains inconsistent. Suddenly, you're having this exact same conversation next offseason, only with fewer veteran options available. That's the risk of patience. But here's the counterbalance. Chemistry matters. Stability matters. And sometimes the cleanest build is the one that doesn't chase splash moves. This decision ultimately tells us how Pittsburgh views its competitive window. If they see 2026 and 2027 as real opportunities, not developmental years, not transitional seasons, then acquiring A.J. Brown aligns with that belief. If they quietly believe the roster still needs foundational layering, then they'll hold the pick and lean into youth. There's no middle ground with a move like this. It's a philosophical fork in the road, and Steelers fans feel that tension. You've lived in that in-between space for years, not bad enough to bottom out, not explosive enough to break through. That frustration builds, it fuels the appetite for boldness. So now it becomes about identity. Are the Steelers' content being steady, or are they ready to disrupt their own pattern? Because bringing in A.J. Brown isn't just about touchdowns and yardage totals, it's about sending a message inside the locker room and across the league that this team believes it's closer than people think. And belief, when backed by action, can change everything. So I'll leave you with this. If you're sitting in that front office chair, knowing the cap is manageable, knowing the draft capital is valuable, knowing the fan base is hungry for a real offensive spark, do you push forward and make the call? Because this is the kind of decision that doesn't just shape a season, it defines a direction. If you make the trade, you're telling your veterans that their window